Welcome to today's Axios News Shapers event. I'm Eugene Scott, Senior Politics Reporter at Axios, and I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, X, LinkedIn, and Axios.com. Join the conversation today on X at Axios and hashtag Axios Events. For our final 2023 News Shaper, we'll speak with newsmakers from Capitol Hill looking at what's driving the news and policy priorities that are top of mind heading into 2024. Our first guest is the Congressman from New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District, Andy Kim. Hi, Congressman. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
Awesome. Well, what have you been working on as you're looking to tie up loose ends in Washington?
Well, look, we just got the National Defense Authorization Act across the line, actually be able to move forward in a bipartisan way in both chambers. As someone who's on the Armed Services Committee, someone who's worked in national security over the course of my career, that was a big deal. I mean, we have so many challenges that we're facing globally right now, and it was important for us to make sure that we're taking our national security seriously, rising up to be able to tackle some of these big challenges that we face and to be able to do that in a bipartisan way. So I'm glad we got that across the line, but obviously a lot of other things happening in Congress that are stuck, things that are not working, and those are the things that are deeply frustrating as we get into the end of the year, not accomplishing the types of things we wanted to get done.
What's one of those things that's stuck that's frustrating you most significantly?
Well, look, I think the easiest one is to say that, we are ending the year without having clarity in terms of how we're going to keep the lights on in the government. We've just been kicking that can down the road, and that's been deeply frustrating. The people of this country deserve to have a government that can work and a government that is able to function and not constantly move from just precipice to precipice, cliff to cliff of just the kind of politics of brinksmanship that we've constantly been seeing. So, I'm right here in the city of Newark. People here deserve to know that their federal government's fighting for them.
What's the reason you would point to as a Democrat who's been at this for a little while as the reason that you all aren't able to make progress in this area?
Oh, look, right now, we have a majority in the House of Representatives and a speaker that's not interested in getting things done. They've been much more interested in playing partisan politics in that kind of way. So, that's something that I find really frustrating. We saw it with the National Defense Authorization Act, where instead of trying to think about this in a bipartisan way, they were engaged in a way that was just trying to bring in some of the worst of the partisan politics, the wokeism and the military attacks that they've had. So those are the things that we saw, and luckily we were able to get past it, but it's been holding up a lot of other important matters.
Is there a matter in particular that it's been holding up that you think is most relevant to your constituents?
Well, look, I mean, there's, because of this process, we're not able to have the kind of in-depth conversations in terms of being able to address the importance of lowering costs right now. So, the number one thing that I'm hearing about, I hear about it from residents here in Newark today, just the high costs that people are facing, whether that's at the grocery store, whether that's with housing and other issues that they're facing. I mean, that's what people are worried about. That's the challenges that they're facing right now. And they don't have leaders, they don't have government right now that's taking that seriously and trying to address it in the way that's needed. So, that was a lot of what we talked about in the campaigns before last year. And if we're not able to follow up on it in a meaningful way, then, the voters are going to just constantly feel like government's not focused on the things that they care about. And that's certainly what I hear a lot of today and every day that I'm out here in New Jersey.
Do you have any ideas of a new approach or strategy you'll be able to take in the new year that'll hopefully get this legislation across the line?
Well, I hope that, first of all, we can come back and keep our government open and have that bipartisan approach that's needed to be able to do that. And, and so we have deadlines coming up in January and February. So if we're able to actually do that in a meaningful way, then yes, I will hopefully have hope that we can do so on other important issues. But as we said, I mean, look, we're going into a presidential election cycle year. There's going to be even less incentive for people to come to the table and have constructive conversation. So I do worry about our ability to actually be able to do the work that we were sent to Congress to do, which is to legislate, to be able to pass laws, try to solve problems for people. For instance, I've been trying to make progress on mental health issues. something that we've been hearing about all over New Jersey, all over the country. We have a mental health crisis right now, especially for our youth, for our kids, our students, and we're failing. We're failing to meet the moment. That's something that is a bipartisan issue, should be a bipartisan issue. I hear people talking about it, but our ability to actually sit down and try to come up with solutions, that has yet to be seen. So that's something that I find very frustrating.
As you've noted, mental health is a topic that we've seen people on both sides of the aisle attempt to address. Why have you all not been able to get on the same page about it?
Look, I think that right now, what I see a lot of is just, again, a lack of interest in trying to just proactively tackle some of the biggest problems. We have a very reactionary Congress. People just kind of responding to the news of the day. It doesn't make for the kind of strategic approach that is needed and what the people deserve. Instead, we're getting, again, kind of distracted in. I mean, just this past week, we spent the time in our Congress, instead of trying to tackle mental health, it was all about, whether or not to proceed on impeachment inquiries into the president's families rather than trying to actually tackle, the things that are affecting people's day-to-day lives. So, that's kind of shows you the prioritization. I have people that I work with that just are uninterested in prioritizing these types of issues that we hear about, like mental health. But, there's something that I'm hearing about. I mean, literally hearing about kids at school, middle school, high school, having suicidal ideation. I'm a father of a 6-year-old and 8-year-old, 2 little boys, and I worry about what kind of environment, what kind of America they're growing up in, as we're seeing that kind of problem from some of our youngest in our communities, especially coming out from a pandemic. My 6-year-old spent nearly half his life, living through a pandemic, and the aftermath. It has real impacts on them that we have to take seriously.
In addition to mental health, what are some issues you would like to prioritize in the new year?
Yeah, well, look, as I said, we need to be able to prioritize lowering costs and addressing affordability. Healthcare writ large is something that's just been so problematic. I worked hard over the last Congress to try to lower prescription drug costs. I was able to pass into law legislation that I helped co-author that would cap out-of-pocket costs for seniors when it comes to their prescription drug medication at $2,000 a year, which is $166 a month. I mean, I was hearing from seniors that were paying $500, $600 out of pocket for their prescription drugs. That's something that's putting money back in their pockets, something that's helping them be able to afford food and other types of necessities. But there's more progress that needs to be done. So I'm glad we were able to tackle that. But we got to make sure we're addressing these needs that we keep hearing about from people.
How effective do you think your party's been able to be in communicating to voters what it is that you all have been doing?
Yeah, look, I definitely need to do more of it. And I just had my 70th town hall in Congress in 5 years. I've done 70 town halls. I just did it this past week to try to make sure we're talking about these different issues. Right here in New Jersey, I've been going around visiting some of the places where construction projects are underway for the bipartisan infrastructure law that we were able to get passed. More that we're trying to do. I've just had a conversation with steel workers and others about, what's moving forward in terms of advanced manufacturing that's been supercharged by the Inflation Reduction Act, but also the CHIPS and Science Act, which is, again, bipartisan legislation that's trying to boost American competitiveness. So, yes, things were gotten done. Do I wish we got more things done to be able to help families out? Absolutely. Real meaningful work did get done, and it's important to be able to build on that, but also tell the story to the American people that, again, feel very frustrated right now. We live in the time of the greatest amount of distrust in government in modern American history. So we have to make sure we're being able to respect the voters, respect the constituents, and try to tell them what it is that we're doing, but also listen to them about what they need.
You've mentioned bipartisanship quite a few times. What area are you most proud of that you've been able to accomplish in this last Congress, or the current Congress, should I say, where you and Republicans have worked together?
Yeah, I'd say that the place there probably is, I'm the ranking member of the Military Personnel Subcommittee, do a lot for veterans, do a lot for our military families. Look, I've been frustrated that we haven't gotten as much done as we like, but we have been able to move the needle forward, get a pay raise for our troops, for their families, try to address their child care needs, other things that they're working on. There's also work that we're trying to do to push forward on addressing the opioid crisis, another place where there is a lot of room for bipartisanship. We've gotten some things done, not enough, but those are the places that I hope we can make more progress on.
All of these topics are ones that viewers are pretty familiar with if they watch the news pretty regularly. Is there a topic that you feel like isn't getting the amount of attention that it needs to be that you hope to elevate next year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think one thing that I hear a lot of is it's actually just about transportation. I mean, public transit, but also just more broadly. The number one issue that I hear outside of high cost of prescription drugs when it comes to healthcare is about just lack of transit. A lot of seniors struggling to be able to get to medical appointments, to be able to get around. A lot of disabled communities struggling to get around. But now it's more broadly than that. So that's something that I hope to really tackle because again, I'm trying to be responsive to what it is that I'm hearing from people in my community.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Congressman, for joining us. We appreciate you taking time to share with us what you're working on.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
And next, we have a message from our sponsor.
We are seeing more about energy transition. And what's been very surprising to me is understanding that it's really all comes back to technology. The current technology that we have is in charge of give or take around 50% of all emission reduction, if it's renewable energy, solar, wind, batteries, but the rest of the almost 50% is going to be coming from technologies which have not been implemented yet, carbon capture, hydrogen, next generation nuclear, and in the future, even nuclear fusion.
What's really interesting is when you combine government incentives with new technologies that are really driving terrific technological advancement, and then that's driving consumer behavior. If we think simply about electric vehicles, what's happening with electric vehicles is there are great incentives for people to shift from traditional vehicles to electric vehicles. So we're seeing not just increasing in automotive registrations to EVs, but we're actually seeing that shift in consumer behavior.
The Inflation Reduction Act is a total package of climate transition incentives in the United States, totaling about $369 billion. There is roughly about $40+ billion worth of incentives for consumers to take charge of our own net zero journey, of starting using these incentives and greening our homes and greening our commute and all the things that we do and consume in our daily lives.
No individual group is going to get us to achieve a low carbon economy on their own. We need the private sector, the public sector, we need individuals, and we need policymakers to be the engine that can help inform each of those groups, to allow them to make better decisions. And that is what helps move business and society forward.
Countries have to move to alternative energy to be self-supplied. Most of the planet is importing fossil and not exporting fossil, and renewable energy gives the geopolitical solution. It's up to 25% cheaper for 1 unit of energy. So the interesting thing is that we are heading into a path of net zero, whether we like it or not, whether we do or do not have an environmental question, just because now it makes perfect economic sense and perfect geopolitical sense, and that have never happened up until now. If we have a long-term view to 2050, the mainstream is going to be renewable energy.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Grace Brufke, Capitol Hill reporter at Axios. Our final guest today is South Carolina's Congressman Jeff Duncan. Welcome, Congressman. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
So I'm excited to talk to you. You guys have a big year ahead, 2024, an election year. You guys have some pressing priorities. Now, you guys are working with the Democrat White House, Democrat Senate, and an even thinner majority with George Santos and Kevin McCarthy gone. So I was hoping I'd kind of pick your brain a little bit on what you think realistically can kind of get done with that dynamic right now.
Well, I mean, it's been tough for the past 12 months, and it's going to continue to be tougher with a slimmer majority. But we've got great leadership and Speaker Johnson, and I think we've got a lot of great members of Congress that are focusing on getting as much done as we can before primary season and election season gets done. So we've got a short window. As chair of the Energy Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce, we're focused on, trying to provide, cleaner, reliable, affordable energy to all Americans. One of the priorities for me is the Atomic Energy Advancement Act, which hopefully we can get to the floor early in January and then get to the Senate because they have an atomic energy or nuclear package over there, and maybe get a conference on something that we can actually get to the president's desk.
Could you go into a little more detail about what that package looks like and kind of what your level of optimism is talking to that side on
I mean, it's about delivering drastic, meaningful reforms to preserve America's nuclear energy fleet, the existing fleet, but also increase whatever the future of nuclear looks like. And that is reforms at NRC to get them in the 21st century, to get them prepared for license renewal and advanced reactor designs and approval. So they should not be an impediment to nuclear advancement in this country. They should be an agency that fosters that. That's what the Atomic Energy Act was. So looking at, just workforce development, which was Diana DeGette, the Democrat ranking member, her initiative, that's workforce development at the NRC. And just looking at those reforms to advance the future of nuclear power, which is, it's clean from an environmental standpoint. It's safe. It's got a 60-year track record here in the United States. We are a real leader on nuclear technology. We need to reclaim that leadership role again and take that away from Russia and China and help developing countries that are looking at nuclear, small modular reactors and traditional light water reactors, looking at Eastern European nations that are looking at nuclear as a way to meet their energy independence because they face an energy crisis with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the disruption of natural gas. And so the United States can be a leader and should be a leader with our allies in that. And at the same time, to be honest with you, we've got to build out a pipeline infrastructure in this country to deliver, cleaner burning U.S. produced natural gas to American utilities, but also export that so that countries like, Vietnam and India and other places can use U.S. produced natural gas to lower their carbon emissions. If you look at how the United States has lowered its carbon emissions over the last decade or more, it's been through the use of natural gas, and we have an abundance here, so we can export that and help other countries as well.
So on a slightly different policy note, you guys are going to arrive back from holiday recess, and you guys have a quick government funding deadline coming up with the first of the laddered CR. I know you're a conservative. I've talked to some other conservatives that have kind of been pushing for some major cuts and have some fears of an omnibus. And I was kind of wondering what your expectations for that are and kind of what your talks have been like with leadership on what you kind of like to see be the outcome there.
Well, I think we're going to have to set the funding level at the FRA level. I don't think any higher funding level than that's going to be acceptable to many congressmen, especially conservatives. So that number was deemed as the funding level. We all want to get back to the normal appropriations process. You've seen this play out really since June, and bringing those normal appropriations bills to the floor is important to conservatives because there are policy riders within those funding bills that, really direct or deny funding in certain areas that are important to our constituents.
So I saw recently, I know we had a big vote on the NDAA right before you guys left. I saw you were a no vote on that. And I was kind of wondering, just kind of moving forward, what you kind of think needs to happen with Republicans' negotiations on going into next year on kind of, I mean, after election season, the numbers could change, but what you'd like to see out of that.
Well, first off, if you appoint a conference committee, the conferees actually have to meet and develop a conference report. You can't rely just on the four corners or the four individuals in the House and Senate to write something. That's just not how the process is supposed to work. And it just shows another indication that the system's broken. And we've got to get back to regular order. That's bringing bills through the appropriations process. That's actually doing conference reports with the Senate where we negotiate. And that's members of Congress that are conferees that can do that. That was one of the frustrations of the NDAA. And then we can't continue to attach, we saw FISA reform or FISA extension on NDAA. A lot of members had problems with that as well when we had a process with a judiciary bill and an intel bill on FISA renewal. So we've just got to get back to regular order. And I think you're going to hear that over and over and over come January.
So I know I've spoken to, especially heading into 2024, spoken with some Democrats that have argued that they're kind of looking to paint Republicans as chaotic and not being able to get work done and pushing for unrealistic expectations after multiple speakers races. And I was kind of wondering if I could get your take on kind of messaging and what Republicans kind of need to do to kind of try and counter that narrative there to show that they kind of can accomplish some of their policy goals.
Yeah, well, under Democrats, we see just unprecedented levels of spending and government subsidies and handouts, whether it's the IRA, whether it's the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. And so, we're $34 trillion in debt, and I think that plays into some of the chaos up there, and that many Republicans feel like, we've got to address these issues that are causing our spending levels to be too high and that our debt is increasing to a point that's untenable. So, that plays out in what does leadership look like? And, honestly, the Democrats can be frustrated with us, but we're doing it right for America in that we're addressing our debt, we're addressing our spending addiction, we're trying to roll back some of these subsidies that were giveaways to programs that were important to the Biden administration, but Bidenomics is not working. Americans know that, they have less money to spend for Christmas this year, that food prices and energy prices, whether it's transportation fuel or just heating and cooling their homes, have gone up. They're frustrated, and I think that's going to play out in the presidential election and the congressional elections.
So my last question for you, so obviously the new speaker in November, if you were to give advice to him of the top thing that he should prioritize for next year, what would it be?
Well, the first thing is energy. We've got to focus on American energy independence. Once again, we can't put all of our eggs in the basket of renewables, and you need dispatchable energy that's 24/7, 365. We need to do that with American produced energy. I like renewables, but I would say that we've got to stop retiring generation and trying to replace it with something that is so intermittent. So that would be the first thing, because energy really affects every commodity price. It affects our national security. That'd be the first thing. The second thing is return to regular order. And I think Speaker Johnson agrees with me on this. Get back to the appropriations process. Act early with a budget. Act early with appropriators to push bills out to the floor before June so that we can actually work on those this spring. That would be the second priority. And then I would say secure the border security. And we see what the Senate's going through right now. Border security is the number one issue across the country. We see this huge influx of non-citizens coming into this country. And it's a factor we're going to have to deal with, whether that's in healthcare or education or social services provided by the states. And so we've got to secure our border. We've got to push back against this massive influx and invasion of our country.
Thank you so much for joining us, Congressman, and happy holidays. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into our segment.
Well, thank you so much, and Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in January.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another Axios News Shapers event. For more of what's driving the news in Washington, or to sign up for Axios Sneak Peek newsletter, visit axios.com/newsletters or download the Axios app. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at axios.com.